Over the Garden Wall is an amazing miniseries that aired on Cartoon Network last fall. Its American folk art influences create a charming style, and its unique storytelling has turned it into a modern classic that's appreciated by audiences of all ages. The series follows two half-brothers, Wirt and Greg, as they travel through the unknown to find their way back home while being hunted by a beast. The brothers face many tribulations and meet a number of strange creatures and interesting characters that inhabit this land. But what if the unknown was more than we thought it was? What if it was actually the land between life and death, and Over the Garden Wall was really just about purgatory? The theory states that Wirt and Greg are actually dying in the river at the end of Chapter 9 in this 10-part miniseries. Chapter 9 is essentially Chapter 0. It acts as a flashback episode, but it's actually where our story begins. It's where the brothers barely avoid getting hit by a train and then violently tumble down a hill into a river, where they get knocked unconscious and begin slowly sinking towards the bottom. The story then jumps to them being placed amidst the extensive forest of the unknown, which could only mean that. Their entire adventure in the woods is essentially the deciding factor if they live or die in the river. Pretty intense, right? The theory continues to state that all the characters they encounter are just the spirits of souls looking for their final resting place. Wirt, Greg, and their frog are just passing through the afterlife. The beast is essentially the devil in this theory, because he is very similar to the post-Faustian version of the devil. If either of them succumb to the beast, they would be succumbing to death itself. The beast takes his victims and then turns them into the Edelwood trees, which the woodsman then chops up, grinds down, and burns in his lantern. Oh, also he tricks people into doing horrible things for him and actually tries to make a deal with Wirt. In Chapter 8, we see angels come and receive Greg and take him up to Cloud City, which we can pretty easily interpret as heaven. After his scuffle with the old North Wind and saving the city, the Queen of the Clouds grants Greg one wish. He wishes to go home, but he can't bring Wirt with him because he has been claimed by the beast. Greg then decides his wish is to switch places with his brother Wirt. So Greg essentially sacrifices himself for his brother. Another funny thing this theory brings up is its huge comparison to Dante's Inferno, which is the first part of Dante Alighieri's 14th century poem, Divine Comedy. It follows a character named Dante as he travels through the afterlife and meets characters from all 9 levels of the afterlife. Sounds pretty familiar. Well, there's even more. In Over the Garden Wall, Beatrice guides the boys to the unknown. And in Dante's Inferno, there is also a lady named Beatrice who leads Dante through heaven during his trip through the afterlife. That sure is a lot of parallels. Now, how do we really know Greg and Wirt were really interacting with souls stuck in limbo? Well, if you can recall, in Chapter 9, the flashback episode, we see Greg hiding behind a grave in the real world before they enter the unknown. But look a little closer at the headstone. The grave reads Quincy Endicott, who was the wealthy tea company owner from Chapter 5 who goes mad within his labyrinth of a mansion. So the boys must have met Endicott's soul whilst traveling through the unknown. And in Chapter 2 we see the very disturbing town of Pottsfield. This story and town is actually a reference to a potter's field, which is an actual thing. It's derived from a term in the New Testament, but in Western culture it refers to a burial site for the unknown. Greg and Wirt dig up some bodies in these fields, which could also prove the souls finding their final resting place common. Greg and Wirt dig up the life of the party, and are told by the residents of Pottsfield that they don't seem ready to join them yet. So could Greg and Wirt really be wandering through Purgatory and essentially be the kid-friendly version of Dante's Inferno? This is a pretty solid way to look at the story. Everything is thought out so much, and it really seems like this conspiracy could be true. Unfortunately, there is one pretty big flaw. In Chapter 10, once Greg and Wirt's adventure in the unknown finally comes to an end, they wake up in a hospital and Greg is holding his frog newly named Jason Thunderburger. And Jason still has the ringing bell used to control Lorna inside of him from Chapter 7. And on February 15th, 2015, popular blog Manuscript Burn interviewed creator Patrick McHale on the subject. In the article, McHale said maybe it's not only about life and death. Maybe it's also about reality versus fantasy and dreams versus wakefulness. Well, this sure gives us a lot to think about. And I think more than anything, this whole theory proves that Over the Garden Wall is a very unique piece of animation. So on the plausibility meter, I'm going to give the Over the Garden Wall conspiracy 4 George Washington the Frogs out of 5. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Cartoon Conspiracy. In the comments, let me know what you thought of this conspiracy and if you agree or disagree with how I debunked it. If you guys have any suggestions for conspiracies you'd like us to cover, let us know in the comments, send us an email, or even make a video and we might feature it. Make sure you guys subscribe to Channel Frederator, and I'll see you all next week.